characterize myself as a social democrat. I am very much pro-capitalism. I'm very much not a socialist. But you're pushing me into like the area where I have to give you my most anti-capitalist takes.
Yeah, go for
So,
it, man.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think the big problem we have right now when it comes to you have to remain fact-based, because if you're trying to pull people from the right over to the left,
And
you have to
likewise,
give
yeah.
them some type of cushion to like land on. And if you're starting with a whole bunch of lies, they're just going to ignore you and they're going to veer completely off to the right.
Yeah.
But it's actually pretty similar with the right as well. Something I've joked about for years now. And holy we're going to expedite visas, and anybody who wants to escape this like soon to be shithole, you better get out now, right?
What got you started into doing political streams on Twitch?
Basically, I've always had like kind of a wide variety of interests. There's a lot of things that I like to talk about. And when 2016 rolled around and Trump was running for president, I noticed that like a lot of the conversations that were happening online were really bad.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't like any shared descriptive basis. There wasn't any shared like world of fact that anybody was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal was like, hey, maybe I can like enter these conversations and kind of like insert a little bit of like realistic, like here are some factual things. Let's talk about these instead of, like the other crazy side. And that was kind of my goal in the beginning. And I'd say that was like 5 or 6 years ago. And yeah.
Here you are, and you've grown quite the big platform over there. You have a lot of people that listen to what you have to say, and you go on quite a lot of debate panels. You and I have been on a few of them together, and you're very clear and concise with your thoughts. You're almost like a leftist version of Ben Shapiro with how fast you talk.
I've heard people say that before, yeah.
Yeah. So where do you see the future being now with Twitch going the way it is as far as politics discussions? Because I know on platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, in my own experience, I know this is anecdotal, Twitch has actually been more lenient to have opposing viewpoints on their platform than any other platform I've seen so far. Where do you see it going from here? Or do you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, really, there's only left-leaning voices on Twitch. There's like one or two notable smaller exceptions. I think that the reality is honestly, nobody really wants politics on their platform. It's like an advertiser minefield. Nobody wants to deal with the potential blowback, with the potential risk, like all the huge issues that people have ran into. Facebook, YouTube, Twitch a little bit, but especially Facebook and YouTube has to do with like political misinformation and radicalization and all of that. And nobody wants to be the platform that like, oh yeah, like Elliot Rodgers just posted 2 videos there before everyone stabbed like 5 people. So, in terms of where we go in the future, I mean, politics always exists in this kind of like uneasy space of like just try to make sure you're not breaking rules, written or unwritten, and then you can kind of keep going as long as possible. And yeah.
Well, I know you said as far as like a lot of leftists on the channel, and I know there's one particular that you have a huge love for, and I was wanting to really get your mindset, your thoughts on this. Hasan Piker, open, renowned socialist, just now bought himself $1 million house out in California, I believe it was. What are your thoughts on
$3 million, but
$3 million house? What are your thoughts on Hasan being just an open socialist and then he goes and he does this? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Honest to God, I don't have any problems with people that advocate for socialism, like buying big houses or living wealthy lifestyles or whatever. I don't think that there's necessarily anything contradictory there. I think that you run into more problems though when you are like constantly ridiculing wealthy people for not donating all their money, when you make fun of like so for instance, a lot of people made fun of a lot of celebrities because they're like, oh, you only donated $1 million, that's like 1% of your net worth. It's like, well, how much have you donated? Or people making fun of like, oh, like does anybody need a house that big, like this is ridiculous. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, like, come on. So when people start to venture into those territories, I'll be a little bit more critical. But I don't think there's necessarily anything inherently hypocritical in spending money, living like a decently wealthy lifestyle, as long as you're like allocating some resources to the things that you believe in. When everything you do in life is centered around like consumerism and living the most expensive, lavish lifestyle possible, and you're not really doing anything to help like any cause you believe in, I think that looks a lot worse. Yeah.
It seems to me like there was. I watched a lot of what he was saying. I watched a lot of the blowback that was coming his way as a result of his purchase, and I think it boiled down to the main question of where is the line drawn fiscally to determine how much you need versus how much you should be giving away. And I've seen a few of Hasan's streams. I've actually reached out to him to bring him on to have a discussion with him, and I haven't heard back from him. He's big time, but I kind of don't agree with the premise of like just being an openly renowned socialist, which again, and I understand that America's built on social programs. We all know this. And I think a lot of people on the right tend to deny those things or the existence of said programs because I think a lot of their identity is founded in capitalistic ideas. It's like, but we do have socialist programs built into America. The problem is it's being abused and manipulated by many people out there. But with Hasan though, like you said, he has gone after many people out there, and then he turns around and he pulls this. So it's kind of like, and again, I'm not knocking the guy. I congrats to him. He's utilizing a system that has benefited him. I hope he does donate a lot of people, but it does come off as just very hypocritical.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dig into. So when I talk about these things, so I want to be very careful. The things that I say, no other leftist will say. So, or I don't know if you consider me a leftist or not. So I want to be very careful in that I'm going to tell you things, but other people don't always act this way. So I'm not saying that other people say these things. So when I talk about things like how we need to help poverty or help homeless people or do things about like healthcare, I always come at these things from a structural or systemic point of view, and I encourage everybody else to do the same. So I live my life in America. I will maximize my end as much as possible, acting in like as moral a way as possible. Everybody that works with me, I pay them very well. I'm not like dumping toxic sewage into the ocean or whatever, but I didn't really need it. But of course, you better believe I applied for a PPP loan. I'm going to do whatever I can to maximize or minimize, I guess, like my tax footprint. I'm going to be taking advantage of whatever business programs, LLC loopholes or whatever exists in the tax code, do that, right? Right. So when I advocate for changing the system, I say we need to change something. We need to change the system. And this idea of holding like personal actors accountable, I think is just a really bad way to go about doing things. So I'll say something like, we need to house the homeless. That's like important. I think everybody in the US agrees that our homeless situation is disgusting. Yeah. But I'm not going to sit here and ridicule like Bezos or Zuckerberg for not single-handedly, sacrificing 90% of their wealth to do so.
It seems to be the trend these days, with going after the insanely wealthy and then also ignoring the good that they've actually put back into the system. And I agree with you there. I think that I drew a lot of fire on my own side when I said that I don't believe we really live in a truly capitalistic system. I think we live in a corporatist kind of system where there's just so much involvement in government and free enterprise or private market, whatever you want to call it. And it just feels like the lines have been blurred. And I think, like you said, the system does need to be reevaluated and looked into, because right now it's not. We could be doing so much better. And I understand how people on the left are calling for that, because I think in their own mind, their own intent is that they want to see the benefit of all Americans. And the same on the right. It just feels like it's just one of those things that your identity is latched into so hardcore to whatever it is that your economic system may be, socialism, capitalism, whatever it is. And it feels like we're all trying to get to the same goal, but people just want to take different avenues to get there. And I think for me, it's more along the lines of siding with more individual liberty, less government involvement.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we disagree there, but I mean, there are going to be parts where I agree that like individual liberty is good, but there are going to be like things that the government can obviously solve for that I think it's incredibly effective to do so with the government. Like, I'm a big fan of. What do you do anything for work? Like, do you know anything about like programming, for instance? Have you ever?
No, I have an OnlyFans.
Okay.
No.
Close enough.
No.
Well, okay,
No.
so I'll use programming as a specific example, but like it applies to everything. Okay, if you're trying to solve a problem, nobody, in any type of professional sense is going to start from scratch. The number one question you always ask is like, has anybody else already solved this problem, right? It can be like going to the gym, right? Should you invent your own program or do you copy what other people do? It could be dieting, right? Do you invent your own diet or do you see what other people do? It could be, or in policy matters, I would say things like healthcare, right? What does every other country do with healthcare? It seems like some form of government intervention is pretty important. So that's like probably the way to go. And that's kind of like how I look at all of these types of things, where it's like, what works best? And that's really all I care about in terms of what solves for a particular problem, what is everybody else doing to solve for it, and then you kind of go from there.
So then your focus would be more on the solving of the problem versus also taking into consideration, and I'm not trying to paraphrase here, so correct me if I'm wrong on this. You're looking at the outcome and what is more effective to the individual person versus whether this infringes on somebody's individual liberty or not. Now, if I'm saying that wrong, correct me.
No, I mean, I agree. Although you kind of take into account like the individual liberty stuff as well. So I'm making up numbers here, but like let's say there's some world where everybody gets a $900 a check a month from the government and they have maximal personal liberties, and there's another world where everybody gets $1,000 a month but they've sacrificed all their liberties. The $900 a month check is probably better because your personal freedom is probably worth $100 a month. You know, like, so obviously you kind of have to guesstimate some of that. I think that people generally, at least in liberal societies, want some degree of autonomy and freedom, and you have to take that into account when you're trying to figure out, like what are the best solutions for certain problems.
I mean, can you constitute or can you call it really freedom when you're essentially just divvying out taxpayer money towards government subsidy programs, which majority of people, I shouldn't say majority, excuse me, which many people are not in favor of? For me, it's like the system is continuously abused. We're seeing it. Okay, take for example with COVID and the shutdowns of all small business, all small enterprise, yet mainstream corporations like Walmart, Target, Home Depot, they all stayed open. And essentially, if you look at it logistically, they funneled everybody into single locations versus spreading them out and keeping small businesses open. So it's like effectively they're trying to combat COVID, but at the same time infringing on individual liberty and the right to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because it sucks to say it, but like small businesses kind of suck. They make up the overwhelming amount of business in the United States, and I mean, they are important in a lot of communities. However, small businesses don't have the economy of scale as large businesses. So there's a couple of realities facing small businesses. One, their wages and their benefits suck. If anybody's ever worked for a small, unless you work for like a tech startup in LA or San Francisco or something, or you're really lucky, generally like the benefits and the compensation that your overall compensation at any small business is probably going to be worse than if you worked for a larger company. The goods and services sold at that small business are probably going to be worse, unless we're talking like a specialty shop. So like I was a musician in college. I'm not going to buy a saxophone from Walmart ever. So I mean, that's like it's a difficult thing that has to be balanced, but a lot of these economic transactions are also a little bit more complicated as well. So for instance, when you empower large corporations to do what they do, to hire a lot of workers and to sell a lot of goods and services, oftentimes that could free up somebody's wallet in order to go and invest more money at those specialty shops. I think it's important sometimes that, and I think people on the left and right do this sometimes. We look at our one pet project and we want it to solve for everything, but that's not always the case. I think there are things that big businesses do really well. I don't need like a mom and pop store to buy like a t-shirt and underwear. I don't need like a mom and pop store to do, this or that, like things like buying like groceries or whatever. But having like smaller businesses that do more specialized things. So for instance, when it comes to like arts and crafts or like instruments for musicians, certain types of car stores, if you like stereo work, we can find like a ton of like more specialized things where it's like, oh, this is cool to have a thing there. I think it's cool to kind of respect that and to have people like function in those areas where they do the best, rather than trying to pretend that like, oh, we're going to find some way to make small businesses competitive with large businesses, which I don't think that can ever happen. Yeah.
But I mean, the large businesses eventually start off, or they did start off at small, but it's, to me, I see what you're saying. And it makes sense to me. Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to compete with a large-scale corporation, but I mean, they've grown to that. Like Amazon started in Bezos' garage, but he also had like a $200,000 investment from his parents. But you get the gist of where I'm going in that. It seems to me like the end goal should be to allow the free market to run and dictate itself. And it feels like with more government interventionism, we don't see that. We see the government favoring certain corporations and destroying the smaller businesses, therefore creating no competition in the market as far as and you're right, as far as like a specialty shop, like I'm probably not going to go buy a saxophone at Walmart. Yeah, I definitely want to go someplace that has specific inventory for that thing. But I get what you're saying, but it seems to me like it kind of undermines the whole premise of the free market being competitive. And if it's not competitive, then it's not a free market. It's a monopoly.
Yeah, but the problem is that by default, you don't really want to be competitive. That's the problem with like a free market. Like a free market that's totally free doesn't have competitors. It has like, barons. Like if I was left with no regulation whatsoever to stream on Twitch, I don't want healthy competition that ensures that I'm maximizing the type of content I produce. I would just hire like, booter sites to kick off and DDoS every other streamer until they can't stream anymore and have to quit. Right? That's what I would. Or, if I was Walmart and I wanted to, compete in some small area, I wouldn't make sure that I'm underselling every other person. I might just write a contract with, local delivery people where it's like, hey, I'm only going to buy from you if you deliver only to me. And so the trucks can either say like, oh, well, I guess we're either not going to serve Walmart or we're only going to serve Walmart and everyone else, right? So I mean, like the concept of a free market is nice, but like the perfectly liquid free markets like make a lot of assumptions that are very, very rarely the case. So for instance, that you have access to all the information so that you can make a good decision, that you have equal access to all of the actual physical stores to go and buy stuff, that everybody is playing like fair and in a transparent manner. There's not like crazy behind the scenes stuff. This kind of goes along with the information stuff. Like if all of these factors aren't in play at every single point in time at 100%, you don't really have a free market. You've got a bunch of other potential problems that could be brewing in the background. Not to say that I don't think markets work or are effective. I think that markets work for a lot of things, more things than people on the left would give them credit for. Whether like anything that you can find like a major store, I think like the free market is solved for pretty well. Even housing, I think the free market can solve for very well. except zoning destroys us, and we're not allowed to build houses, right? That could be an example of a government intervention that messes it up. So yeah, I mean, markets are real, markets are powerful, but I don't think that just having a free market for everything always leads to the best competition, because oftentimes the competitors don't really want to compete. They want to collude or destroy competitors so that they don't have to compete.
Well, I think you're also framing this in the premise or the optics of the actual seller versus the consumer. I mean, consumer is ultimately the one who benefits the most by offering a lower cost good, which is that occurs through competitive markets. And if competitive markets are not competitive, then the consumer's fucked. I mean, the example you just gave, and I know we agree to disagree on this, but the example you gave as far as, like, say, for example, Walmart contracts out somebody to a trucking company to say they can only deliver to Walmart, and then another trucking company comes along and says, hey, we'll deliver to, I mean, it's just like, it creates its own competition. It creates its own opportunities. Say, for example, streaming services. We have Twitch, you have YouTube, you have Facebook, things such as that. I mean, it seems to be working fairly decent. And then again, if a private business decides that we're going to regulate even harder than other companies, and then you have Getter, Parler, and again, a lot of right-leaning echo chambers that populate the system, which again, if a free market hadn't occurred and we said these companies have monopoly, which they're protected by the government, it kind of screws up the system. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but I feel like that example works just perfectly in the other direction. And I think that a lot of the newer, I don't know what you would call this new era of like populist conservative that follows Trump more. I think that a lot of these newer types of conservatives actually figure that out. That like, okay, well, hold on, the free market doesn't work, because now conservatives are getting banned from like every fucking platform on the internet, and now all of the like progressives and left-leaning people are like, well, hey, just go start your own Twitter. That's what you always said. And I think now a lot of conservatives are realizing, oh fuck, okay, hold on. Well, this is kind of bullshit, because Twitter, Facebook, they've got first mover advantage. There's a massive initial investment needed to overcome all the infrastructure needed to do this. Like realistically, nobody's on Gab, nobody's on these like smaller platforms. It's like, okay, well, fuck, this is actually bullshit. Like the free market doesn't work as well here because there's such a massive, almost like quasi-monopoly presence of like 2 or 3 other tech companies that all seem to more or less work in tandem with each other when it comes to policing content. So it's like, fuck,
Where do you see that going? Totally going up. Where do you see that going as far as the censorship of, say, for example, Facebook? I literally just caught another 30-day ban over there because somebody on my main page was saying, hey, I posted a picture and somebody said, you look like you're in your airsoft gear, because I play airsoft sometimes with my veteran buddies. I said, yeah, be careful. I'll shoot your pinky nail off. And they banned me for 30 days. The context was clearly not in violation of terms of service. Like, it was just a joke. But it seems to me like, and I know when I'm crossing the line. I know when I'm posting something to troll, to shitpost. We all do it. But then I know when I get banned for something that's like legitimately not a bannable offense. Where do you see these tech companies going in the future as far as how draconian they're becoming with their terms of services?
Okay. I want to be very clear. I characterize myself as a social democrat. I am very much pro-capitalism. I'm very much not a socialist. But you're pushing me into like the area where I have to give you my most anti-capitalist takes.
Yeah, go for it, man. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the big problem we have right now when it comes to censorship is I think that censorship is kind of like this end product of this hyper-capitalistic environment. So what's happening is the companies don't really give a fuck what you post. They don't actually care like if something is hateful or offensive or whatever. What companies are is they are hyper-fixated on maximizing the amount of revenue that they generate via advertisers. And advertisers are hypersensitive to avoid like any type of negative blowback publicly. So
yeah, like the Adpocalypse of PewDiePie and the rest of them. Yeah,
exactly. So when you have advertisers that are very afraid of any negative blowback whatsoever, and you have platforms that rely on their income or rely on their spending rather to sell advocate campaigns and everything, when you rely on them to fund your whole platform, like I think that the natural consequence of that is like, okay, guys, we need to ban fucking anything that might ever like upset like a customer of any of these companies, because if that happens and they pull our ads, we're fucked. I don't know. Like technically, I would say that the censorship stuff is really just markets working as they should. You have corporations that are trying to maximize their profit. The way to do so is to cut out all of the potential liabilities so that they can appease their customers, which are the people selling them ads, not the people using the platforms.
Right.
And yeah, I think more or less that's kind of what we see right now. I don't know what the solution to that is. That's a really, really rough one, I think.
I've seen it. The thing that kind of pissed me off as far as with Republicans, like I pulled away from the GOP a lot. I've become more centrist, more constitutionally based, more individual liberty, less socially a liberal, I guess you could say. I believe in, your right to do whatever you want. But the one thing I've seen that conservatives promised when they created these new social media platforms is no censorship. It's like, oh, there's always going to be censorship. You can never create a social media platform without some type of regulation, because then you're going to have child porn, drug sales, things such as that. So there does have to be some modicum of laws. But the one thing that pissed me, or not laws, but regulation, whatever you call it, terms of services. But when Parler first started, I tried to it ties in with your advertisement point, is that I tried to run an advertisement for Shell Shock CBD, and they said no, because it's a marijuana based product. I was like, well, wait a minute. I thought like this was no censorship, and technically it's not. But even still, it kind of pissed me off that a lot of conservative platforms are actually being hypocritical on what they think is free market, free speech, things such as that. And I see many people, like, for example, I had Dan Crenshaw on the show, and he is not pro legalization of marijuana. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's like, you're either for individual liberty, the right to do with your body as you want, or you're not. And I think there's a lot of GOP people that are still in the mindset of church and state should be the same. We should legislate based upon theology and individual beliefs versus actual liberty and individual practice of freedom. It's kind of aggravated me to see this, that the GOP is turning very hypocritical on this.
Yeah, that's actually something that was really sad growing up for me. You know, I always joke that, like, when we're on the left, you have to remain fact-based, because if you're trying to pull people from the right over to the left, you have to give them some type of cushion to land on. And if you're starting with a whole bunch of lies, they're just going to ignore you, and they're going to veer completely off to the right. But it's actually pretty similar with the right as well. Something I've joked about for years now is, if you are a relatively conservative person in the United States, you'd have conservative values, conservative beliefs. There is really no political party that represents you, because the GOP is fucking insane. Like, if you're somebody that believes in, I think that we should have personal liberties, the right to do what we want. I don't believe in all this government intervention as much. I think people should be left in their own communities to figure that out. The party that you have to belong to is like passing draconian, like, anti-abortion legislation. They're trying to ban and kill people for fucking drugs. You've got like the DEA. They're like, it's like, fuck, like, where the fuck is your party at? You know, there's the Libertarian Party, but holy fuck, that's just a whole other thing. You know? They
gatekeep harder than anybody, and I tried pushing into the Libertarian Party, and it was very difficult, because again, their biggest comeback was, you're not a real libertarian. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna deal with this. But no, I agree. It's like there's a lot of people, I feel like, on both sides are starting to feel like, okay, where is my party at? Because I'm not in agreement with a lot of what the GOP is actually starting to stand for. You know, they push hardcore small government, and the GOP essentially is just turning into Trump loyalists, which has really concerned me. Like, I was a diehard Trump loyalist at first, and then I started to understand and realize, like, you cannot be loyal to any singular politician. It doesn't work that way. You have to call it on a case-by-case basis. And that's why when Biden got elected, I was like, okay, I hope he does good. I don't think he will, but I hope he does good for the betterment of America. But unfortunately, that leads us into the next issue of the Middle East. We're like the whole Biden thing right here. What's your take on what's going on right now in the Middle East with the withdrawal to Taliban takeover?
I'm going to drop the hot take. I think he did the best he could have. There's a lot of arguments against this that I've put up, and every time I do, I run into a few counter arguments that I just don't have a response to. I don't know where you want to go from there. Or I can give my short spiel on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Well, let's start with Biden's withdrawal.
So it seemed to me that the obvious point was, if they were planning to withdraw, there should have been a more concrete way by which they got out important assets or people that had worked with the U.S. Prior to leaving. Like, that should have been a process that was set up like 2 or 3 months in advance. However, and maybe this is naive, but if we have some semblance of faith in the ANA, or at least we want to have like this outward appearance of faith in the ANA, where we're like, okay, you guys do it. It does look really fucking weird to be like, all right, just so you guys know, we're going to leave in 3 months, and holy fuck, we're going to expedite visas, and anybody that wants to escape this like soon to be fucking shithole, you better get out now, right? That's a really weird thing. And yeah, man, fuck, Afghanistan is so fucking hard. I don't know like what other alternatives. It sucks. What happens right now sucks. And it actually even reflects on the approval, because for the first time, Biden has flipped to the negative in the approval. And the stories are sad and the videos are horrific, but man, I don't know what else could have happened. I'm not sure. Yeah, what do you think?
There was anybody that had boots on the ground, and I don't blame any civilian for not knowing this, because how would you? Like, I can't. Yeah, for people that don't have an accurate depiction of what's going on over there, we trained the ANA. I was there in 2010, 2011, and the ANA it was like dealing with petulant children. They made horrible soldiers, and essentially, and this is what a lot of top brass never really came to grasp, was that with Afghanistan and Iraq, places like that, there's very little national pride. It's all tribalism. It's all to their individual tribes, Sunni, Shia, Kurd, whatever the case may be. And it's very difficult to get them to unite and to actually work towards a common goal without there being a power grab. But with the ANA, it was the same. We would take ANA from various different parts of the country and bring them to a different parts. They wouldn't have any kind of family ties or loyalty. But they were not very good soldiers. But we had 20 years to train them. We armed them. We paid them everything. And everybody kind of knew that this was going to happen. So I can't blame the Taliban takeover on Biden. I can't. We knew this was going to happen. It didn't matter which president was in office. They were just waiting for their time to move, and they moved. As far as the withdrawal process itself, it definitely could have been handled a lot better. I mean, there was conflicting stories of the intelligence community saying, hey, there's still Americans over there, yada, 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 be careful. It just seemed like there was a lot of balls that were dropped. But unfortunately, this is the ramifications of an entire administration not working together closely with their military counterparts. And I feel like there's just it's complicated, man. It's just very complicated. And I've gone into it in the podcast before, but as far as like right now, a story just broke that I think it's Panjshir was the last stronghold that was holding out against the Taliban and is currently fallen, I think like 4 or 5 hours ago. So now Afghanistan is completely in Taliban control. And it's a sad thing to see, man. 20 years invested in this. And I kind of hope that, our generation remembers this and reminds the next generation, don't buy into propaganda pushed and escalated by the government for the sake of freedom. So...
yeah, or even just what you said before is something that a lot of people don't realize. Like in the West, we identify really strongly with our countries. Like people that are in America are American. People that are in Sweden, I'm not even talking like ethnically, but like your country means something, But in the Middle East, depending on what country you're in and what other Western country cut your borders up, like you don't actually feel that shit at all,
Yeah.
And this concept of, because oftentimes in the West we'll look at like, and I've even seen rhetoric that amounts to as much, because I saw people demonizing the ANA and shit. It's like, we're Americans, we would fight for our country, Afghan people don't feel like there's like a coherent state of Afghanistan that every like member is a citizen of. Like even places with Iraq, you've got Kurdish people, the KRG that feel, like they're part of Kurdistan, which isn't even technically a real country. Right? It's part of Iraq more so than like Iraqi citizens or something.
Yeah.
And that lack of understanding, it almost feels like people expect every new Middle Eastern project we have to turn into like another Israel, where they're going to be these like brave magical soldiers that like feel strongly about like their own like area and they're going to defend it against everyone. And it's like, I've heard that in a very dark way, I can almost say that kind of respect Biden for just biting the bullet on it, because I think, as you said, no matter who was going to leave, it was going to be fucked. And the fact that he actually did it, it was
I was talking to a friend of mine about this. I was like, look, do you think, I was like, and I'm not a conspiracy, I don't believe in the QAnon bullshit, I don't believe in any of that. I was like, but do you think Trump intentionally did a withdrawal? He did pull down. I think it was left like 25 to 5,000 troops remaining in Afghanistan. And he had 4 years because he said he was going to do it.
Pulled us down to the lowest levels.
And do you think that he kind of left it to where if he didn't get elected, then maybe Biden would take that, and then knowing full well what was going to happen, Trump didn't do it because, it'd make him look bad, optics?
Yeah. I mean, he negotiated the pullout in May, right? Which was into the next presidential presidency. But so who knows what would have happened? Trump, honest to God, actually, Trump probably would have left because he had no problem in Syria just like leaving the Kurdish people. He probably was like, fuck it. He probably would have left the same. But
at least, so that's the one benefit I can give Biden. When Biden first took office, like he dropped missiles on Syria. Like he went after targets. I was like, I can respect that. I can respect that he's not committing troops. But at the same token, though, it did lead me to believe, like, is this a political move? Trump did negotiate the ceasefire. He did negotiate the withdrawal, and he did intend on doing it. From what he said, he also talked about making marijuana legal, but that never happened. Again, it takes an act of Congress and all that stuff. But I think that more and more people are starting to wake up to this idea that when somebody on the campaign trail is promising you something, don't always believe that. Like you shouldn't believe, because sometimes they don't have the power. There's a lot of GOP freshman candidates or GOP freshman congressmen and women that go in there and it's like, or even on the left, it's like, we're going to ban guns. Like, you don't have the power individually to do that. That's what Congress
I was going to say,
is
you say GOP, but I remember the squad making a lot of crazy promises when they came in. Yeah,
them too. Yeah,
I think a lot of people just, and this is actually something I've noticed more and more. It's really funny, but my understanding of the American political system over the last, especially like 3 years, it's actually gotten so much simpler. And I go back to like really, really basic things that you could learn in grade school in terms of seeing how everything works. And I realize that like a lot of the conflict and a lot of the anger for how our system works is honestly people just don't really know like how the government kind of functions.
Yes.
Like
100%.
a really good example is people on the right thought that Trump could, unilaterally do so many things, and he couldn't. And
Okay,
goddamn,
so wait, now to be fair on that, and this is what really pissed me off about the GOP is that Trump went in there was like handing out executive orders left and right, and the executive order didn't come to fruition until 75, which was enacted by Congress, which makes no fucking sense to me. How you would tip the scales to where now the executive branch has far more power. And I told Republicans, like, you are so happy that Trump is signing these executive orders, like to secure funding for the border wall, all this other stuff. Like, but when Biden comes, when that sword swings the other way, then you're going to be bitching about it. And it's the first thing Republicans bitched about under Biden was as soon as Biden gets enough, EO after EO after EO. And that's where I think a lot of people,
we saw that with DACA, right?
Yeah.
When Obama did DACA,
Yep.
and Trump tried to get rid of DACA.
Yep.
I don't know where that's standing right now in terms of going through the courts and everything. But there's a lot of like there was a lot of people on the right that were upset that like Trump couldn't be a fucking king. There's a lot of people on the left that keep shouting at like federal legislators, people in Congress, and the president, do something about the police, do something about the police. And it's like federal authority has fuck all to do with the police. It's not going to happen. That's your cities, that's your city governments, right, or your state governments maybe. But these are your city officials, and a lot of people just don't know where a lot of this stuff comes from, and then they get really upset because things aren't happening, but they don't even know like where to look for things to actually be happening, and it's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, stating the condition of what's going on the right now is that the only thing I tell people is like, well, how can we fight back? Is like, you vote. Elections have consequences. These are some of the consequences as of the last election. But a lot of people on the right now feel like the election process of the system, the sanctity of it, has been compromised due to suspected voter fraud, things such as that. What do you say to that? Because when people ask me about it, it's like, do you think this was a rigged election? It's like, look, here's where I stand. I'm no fan of Biden, but it's like, unless you can showcase me overwhelming proof that there was election tampering, then I have to accept these results. I don't like them, but then there are things coming to fruition that, like I talked to Representative Crenshaw, I was like, if things come to fruition that showcase there was tampering, would you change your stance? And he said, absolutely. So I think a lot of people are like, I want to believe it, but until you show me the proof, and these articles, and that's where we go into misinformation in the media, just all this propaganda on both sides. Nobody knows what to believe anymore.
Yeah, that descriptive reality and people's ability to like, I don't like to use the term critical thinking, but like people's ability to kind of like analyze situations and understand where the incentives are, it's really, really, really bad. So when I look at the voter fraud stuff, I try to like, let's say that I wanted to be completely nonpartisan and I just want to like analyze this as like third party as possible. So my first question would be, okay, where are the incentives, right? So the DOJ is headed by Barr, who is fiercely a Trump loyalist. So if anybody's going to lie about voter fraud, it'd probably be him. A lot of our intelligence agencies had new, the head appointees were appointed by Trump. So arguably, you could say some of them might be, in Trump's pocket. And we had hundreds, I think, of federal judges that were appointed by Trump's administration. And they all would probably have at least like a political interest in making sure that, Trump stayed in power. And when I look at how all of the incentives kind of line up to where like these people kind of have like a lot of potential bias, not 100% potential bias to lie for Trump, when all of these institutions came together and universally said no voter fraud, we looked at the full tapes, we looked at all of this, we broke apart the machines, the FBI took apart the machines, Barr gave his opinion on the machines, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, the TSA, every single intelligence agency started giving their opinions on these machines, and then you've got like all of the federal judges some were Trump appointees that looked through all of the court cases, they looked at all the affidavits, they had people testify, and no voter fraud was found. It's like, damn, like if you still want to believe that voter fraud is there, you are holding out for some sort of conspiracy that would be historic. Like nothing in the history of all of mankind would be a conspiracy to the level that would have been required to rig this election and keep so many people quiet about it. That's how I do it.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but in a sense, it's like, for me, it's like if you show me the evidence and the evidence is overwhelming and it's irrefutable, then you've got my vote. And people don't like hearing that, and it's like, I don't like it any more than you do. But people, they go after everybody on the right. Like if you don't sit there and espouse like voter fraud thing, like then you must secretly want Biden. You're a part of the swamp. You need to be drained. All these other things. It's just hyperbole. But for me, it's like I got to see the evidence. And if we sit there and we say we're the party of all this stuff of facts, evidence, things like that, and then none of it's being showcased to the manner in which would actually be very influential as far as like weighing an election or tipping an election, I don't know what I'm supposed to believe or say at this point. It's just I feel kind of like lost, like a lot of other people out there, because like you just said, didn't Barr flip on Trump at the end?
He did because Trump kind of flipped on Barr.
Yeah.
Because Barr came out and said like,
yeah.
There's no evidence. Like the FBI took apart these machines. Like we didn't find Hugo Chavez's ghost, inhabiting the street. Like seems like it was probably okay. Yeah. It's like, what are you gonna do? I will be. Oh man, this is one of my. It sounds weird, but this is one of the craziest moments of probably in my living history. I don't even think people talked about it that much. I really don't like Mike Pence. I don't like the religious fundamentalist bullshit. That shit is fuck. I hate it. However, watching him on election night, Trump came out, and I don't know if you remember the speech, but Trump came out and he basically declared himself the winner. He said we've won this. It's over. Look forward to the next 4 years. Fuck off. And Pence came out right after him, and he reiterated we are sure we'll win once all the votes are counted. We're gonna wait for the tally to come in. To watch him walk Trump back from that cliff was a really insane moment. There was so much hesitancy on election night for what the fuck would happen with the votes coming in late because of the mail-ins and everything. And one of the things I always say, and I don't want to give advice to Republicans, but I see this as a sad thing on the Republican side. I genuinely think that the Republicans probably would have been able to win that election if Trump didn't demonize mail-in votes so fucking much. Because I guarantee you, because in some of these places, the vote, it was razor thin fucking margins in some of these swing states. I wonder how many Republican voters couldn't make it to the ballot box for whatever reason that would have actually mailed in a ballot had Trump not constantly talked about how rigged and horrible they all were. I don't know.
That's a good point. I don't know. That's actually yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know.
I used to be a big fan of saying that we should all have mail-in ballots are awesome. The more people that vote, the better it is for Democrats. Let's do fucking mail-in ballots. But I think there have been articles on Slate and Vox where they've dug through what is the data on mail-in voting, and it actually doesn't really disproportionately favor any party. It ends up being about 50-50. It just gets more people to vote. So yeah.
States like Texas and Georgia that are basically putting in place stricter voting laws. How do you feel about that?
I think if you want to have a stricter voting law, that's fine, but it shouldn't be to prohibit anybody from joining. And this is kind of this is the issue that I always have with Republicans. So Republicans will say, we need a voter ID. I'll join you 100%, but you have to make it free, and you got to make it easy to apply for. Right? If it was free and fair available, then fuck it. If you want a voter ID, that's fine. There are plenty of European countries that have you show an ID to vote, but they don't make that ID contingent upon you scheduling a 3-hour trip to the DMV and a $42 fee or whatever, right? You get that ID for free. So if people want to do voter ID and that's really important, that's fine. You just need to allocate the funding for it.
I agree. I 100% agree with that, because there's been a lot of people that say that, number one, it impacts minority groups at a higher percentile because they have the lower economics bracket. It's okay, so to combat that or to mitigate from that from happening, it needs to be free. So and I think that's entirely possible. I think that's completely possible. I mean, you can even do that when you go down to get your driver's license. Say, hey, would you also like to apply to get your voting ID free of charge, or whatever the case may be? When you register your address, there are ways of making this happen. But I don't think the intent behind it was to specifically go after certain minorities by the GOP. I think it was, we want to protect the sanctity of the election. But I think both sides get into this and say, oh, it's because the right is racist, and the left is saying, or the right saying it because, oh, they want to use minorities to get more votes, bust in more illegals, all these other things. And it just feels to me, it's like, yes, I think the sanctity should be protected, but if we go back to the Constitution, nowhere in the Constitution to talk about actually having to provide voter ID in order to vote, or regards to just being a citizen, which, again, to be able to prove you're a citizen requires an ID. So it's like, I see both sides of this, but I think what you just said makes the most sense. Like, we should be able to allocate the funding necessary to get them voter IDs, which would allow them to then participate and vote, and to attain a voter ID, social security number, things such as that, to prevent illegals from coming in and tipping the scales in a sense. Which to me, I have no problem with immigrants. I have no problem with immigration. I think immigration is a good thing. It's what this country was founded upon. And it brings like another subject, and I wasn't planning on this, but I wanted to have this discussion with you in regards to when I grew up, it was growing up in what I thought would be Oh
Wait, how many
God.
fucking cats do you have?
I got two, bro.
Okay.
This
All
is
right, that's
I'm,
number two.
I'm at my headquarters, my office here, Shell Shock CBD. So I have two cats and my dog. The cats stay here. The dog comes home with me. So the cats are free roaming. But no, when I grew up, and this is me, like, this is a hot take for me. I grew up with America being warm apple pie, football, baseball. This is my America. And as I've gotten older, as I participated in more debates and listened to different perspectives, something kind of dawned on me. I had a friend of mine that he's got a big a big meme account on Instagram. And we got into a debate. And he said, we need to preserve American values. Like, well, let me ask you something. What are American values? Like, what does this entail? And it seems to me that a lot of people can't explain it because they think it's rooted in fundamental, I don't want to say white supremacy. It's rooted in the vast majority of the white populace that they dictated this is how America was. And it's like, but you do realize, like, the American dream applies to every single person out there from any different kind of country. Like, there is no true American. We're all mutts. We all come from different walks of life, different parts of the world. Even the Native Americans immigrated over. So when people try and say that America is this per se, it feels like it's very disingenuous to the actual foundation of America, because we were the majority for so long, that becomes the optic of what America should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, it's really interesting you bring that up, because this is always my trap question for like white supremacists or for like the really, really extreme right guys that I argue with, is usually, so the arguments will start out, we can't have immigrants coming here importing other values, and then I'll say, well, like, what kind of bad values are they bringing? And they don't really have an answer, and then they'll be like, well, we need to protect like our kind of like American values. And then I always ask, like, okay, well, what are American values? I've lived in a lot of places well, not lived in, but I've traveled to a lot of places in the U.S. and I've had friends in a lot of different places in the U.S. If you're going to try to like describe a common set of values that will encapsulate, like, so I'm from Nebraska and now I live in like California, right? Find me like a gay guy in San Francisco and see how much he has in common with like a farmer in Iowa.
Right.
And that's going to be a really, really, really hard challenge,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's I think that it's hard to really know, because nobody's completely honest about it, and sometimes people just don't realize it. I think it's kind of scary to see the world change. I can empathize with that, and as you get older, though, I mean, like, that kind of happens. Some people grew up, burning whale blubber in lamps, and then light bulbs came along. We've grown up. How old are you?
37.
37. Okay, I'm 32. So I truly do believe that we have probably grown up seeing more change, I think, than any generation in human history. Because and I feel like I'm dating myself almost by saying this, but when we were kids, the internet wasn't really a thing, right? Like, you were getting like commercials to be like, check on keyword cartoon at AOL.com. Like, the internet really wasn't actually like a thing at all. So our world has changed so much, and I can understand some people getting a little bit scared where stuff is changing so quickly and you can't even recognize what's around you. I think that, like, you combine that with the fact that we have become very internationally, or more realistically, nationally focused, where the only things that anybody talks about, if you go into some town, like, every Republican in this country has an opinion on AOC, Ilhan, Omar, Rashid Tlaib, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton. Every single left-leaning person has a really strong opinion on, like, Grinzy Lamb, or Donald Trump, or Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, like these other figures. But if you ask them a question like, who is your governor, people want to know the answer, right? So, like, simultaneously, the world is changing faster than ever has been. And then also you're, like, more disconnected from your local communities, and you're only essential attention. I think we're mind fucked. There's like 20 other topics here, like the internet. We're more isolated from people. We don't have as many friends in real life. Everything is super duper duper fucked. We don't have religion anymore, which I don't like personally. I don't like religion, but being able to go to one building every Sunday and see a whole bunch of friends and family and, like, hang out with people and do community projects, like, all of that is gone. And
I don't know if I'd say it's all gone. I would say that the internet has definitely opened up our eyes to the good and the bad. I mean, I get what you're saying. I agree partially. I think that, in a sense, religion's still there. I think a lot of people are going to be less vocal because they get attacked more online. I mean, go on Twitter and say that you're a Christian in certain echo chambers and you're going to be attacked on it. And also, I can't blame anybody that, when you go in there and you vocalize those beliefs, knowing full well where you're going, like, don't be surprised when people come back and lash back at you. Like, I'm on Twitter and I troll people all the time. It's fun. But when somebody trolls me, I can't can't be upset because I know what type of environment I'm stepping into. Therefore, I can't fault anybody. But as far as like social media, I think it's exposed us to what's going on around the world, which is good and bad, because then we have, for example, the good is that we see what's actually going on around the world. We see what's going on in our own country. We have more insight. And it's just like almost an information overload. There's so much. And now we're at a stage where we don't know what's truth and what's not, because there is a lot of fake news media on both sides of the aisle on this one. Both of them try and manipulate for the sake of sales. Money, I believe, is the root of all of this. Clickbait, all this stuff. And then the bad is that I think sometimes we get hyper-focused on non-important issues for the sake of just being upset about something. I don't know. And like I said, you're right, though. We're growing, we're changing, and I think people are generally scared of that. Like I was scared of it for the longest time until I started to wake up and understand. It's like, why are you afraid of acknowledging that America is not the America that you grew up in or you thought it was? And for me, it delved into, well, a sense of identity, closure, safety, security. And then you start to understand, like, no, America was founded on a lot of blood, but it doesn't make us perfect, it doesn't make us bad. It just means that we've learned from our mistakes. We're moving forward a good way, and we should continue to do so. But it definitely brings about a new perspective, and I think the one thing that would be horrible for us to do is remain staunch in our beliefs without the ability to at least hear other people's perspectives for the sake of not just agreeing with, but to just simply understand the other side's point of view. And I think that's why I love having a lot of the debates when I have people on the panel that can actually back up what they're saying with their stance. Like, okay, I might not agree with it, but at least I can understand where they're coming from. And maybe there's a commonality in there that we can agree upon as far as how we get to the end goal that I think most of us are in common with. I don't know of a lot of Democrats that really hate America. I mean, there are some, and there's people on the right as well. I mean, you got your assholes in every bunch, but I think we all want to get to the same goal, which leads me to the next thing as far as the two-party system. Where do you see this going?
First, I want to say to the other thing real quick, the fake news stuff. Not even. Yeah. The problem is it doesn't even have to be fake news anymore. In that you can actually show real news, but it can give people such a horrendously misleading view of what happens in the U.S. So, for instance, it is possible that every single day I might be able to find a news story of an immigrant killing like a Native person or raping a Native person. I could show you one story every single day, 365 days a year. Yeah. And I mean, like if you see something like that, like obviously, like holy shit, there's a problem here. But is there? There's 47 million immigrants living in the U.S., right? Or I'll flip it on the other end. I could show you every single day a racist interaction between a cop and a black person or somebody else, right? And if you saw one of those a day, people would lose their mind. But we lose their mind when we see one every couple months, right? Yes. But let's say that was happening once a day. Would that really be that bad? There's like 100 million some interactions between police and cops. There's like 500,000 plus police officers or something in the United States. Like if we had like 365 bad interactions here, is that actually that bad? Like what do you expect the number to be?
Exactly.
It's really, you can pick and choose stories that you want to report on. And this is a big country. There's a lot of people.
It's this belief in this non-existent utopian country. And again, and you're right 100% that if we had, say, for example, we talked about gun crime or racist interaction with the police, things such as that. I'm not saying, and you're not saying it's a good thing that the numbers are the numbers are what they are. It's a fact that it's actually good that they are that low. If we did have a problem to that magnitude, you would most certainly know it. But like we said with social media, it tends to put a magnifying glass and make this the most this needs to be our focus right now. Let's
are insane. I think I've seen enough data that I'm convinced. I think that there are some systemic injustices against black people in the United States. I think that the data bears that out. But that doesn't mean that every single time a black person gets pulled over by a cop, he's going to get fucking executed if he says the wrong thing. It doesn't mean that there are like this like cornucopia of racist police officers that are barreling down the street looking for every fucking minority that they can pull up on and unload on, right? Like people will go so hyperbolic with things, and the fact that you can pick out any news stories you want to kind of support whatever story. They could even be true stories, and it's like, well, fuck. Like, does that necessarily does a couple, even if you have 10 stories, does it actually make a trend? Does it actually say that some real problem exists here that we need to look at?
Well, both sides do that, because I'll see the left talking about how officer shoots black. So, and I drew a lot of fire for this one as well. As like I said, the BLM, the emergence of the BLM actually brought some good things with it, a lot of bad that I didn't agree with, but it did actually bring some good things in regards to highlighting those that were tyrannical behind a badge, using that badge as cover. I was like, and then it made people start to wake up and understand, like, your blind support of the thin blue line is not a good thing. You should always be skeptical of power and authority. You should always be that way, regardless if it's a cop or a politician. You should always be skeptical, and you don't trust. You verify. And
Sure.
people didn't like hearing that. It's like, what, you don't support the police? Like, I support the good police. I support the ones that are doing it the right way. But then it even goes deeper into that rabbit hole. It's like, well, what about cops that enforce, gun laws that go in direct violation of the Second Amendment? We can have a long conversation about this. But going back to what I was saying about the BLM, the emergence of that and the idea of like, look, there is a lot of police brutality out there. There is a lot of people that use that badge as a means of wielding authority over those that can't fight back. And what happened, though, is that those people that were being highlighted, everybody else got painted with the same brush. It's like, wait a minute, wait. Like you said, like the social media highlights one specific incident, and now all cops are bad, or one specific incident, and all black people are violent. It's like, okay, well, if we look at the statistics, we can actually break this down and say, okay, wait, if we did have a problem, you'd know it at a higher scale. And that's what social media, that's one of the downfalls of social media, is because just like you, it's like, hey, look over here, but let's ignore this over here.
Yeah, and then I don't know where you. I don't want to open up a whole other potential can of worms, but like,
go for it. Let's do it. Yeah.
I'm trying to pick examples from like left and right to be relatively fair in my critique. So like, I'm critical of the police thing that left people. Like, if cops were killing black people in the United States, we wouldn't have to be. We would see that every single day. It would be fucking crazy. Okay, it would be unprecedented amounts of murder in the street. But then I also say the same to like people on the right that are like, oh, there's a ton of horrible side effects and people dying from these vaccines, and it's like, dog, there's been over 2 billion people vaccinated in the world, fully vaxxed, over 4 billion doses given out. If a lot of people were dying of the vaccines, we wouldn't have to go to like, the right-wing conservative pundit, for truth.com to see those stories. Like, it would be fucking everywhere,
No, hold on a second now here's the thing. No. I'm actually, statistically, you're 100% dead on the money. Yes, I will acknowledge that. Like, if these vaccines were killing people at a high rate, we would know it 100%. But it also brings into mind I had a live YouTube stream pulled down because we were discussing COVID and Fauci. And I feel like a lot of people just don't know what they're talking about. I am by no means a medical professional, but my stance is as follows. I don't want to take the jab, but I'm not against other people doing it. I just want the freedom to choose not to do it. I just want to see long term, just to be safe, because I've dealt with the government for many years. I dealt with them with the burn pits, all these other shit that are fucking my generation of veterans up. It's like, yeah, I don't really trust you so much. I remember Agent Orange, how that wasn't a thing until we actually started seeing the after effects. So it's just one of those things of like, fool me once, shame on you. For me twice, well, I'm a fucking idiot, something like that. So it's kind of like, I believe in the liberty value of this. If you don't want to take it, don't take it. If you do want to take it. And again, if the vaccine helps you, prevents you from getting it, then what are you concerned about if nobody else wants to take it? But you're right in the sense of like, if it was killing people en masse, like many claim that it is, we would certainly see that. But I also feel, to go the devil's advocate on that, the media certainly does freaking play down and pull many different articles out there condemning these vaccines. There have been multiple doctors across the thing. My buddy Josh sent me a YouTube video of a doctor testifying. All the credentials, YouTube pulled it. They won't allow any medical misinformation to get out there, which I feel only inflames the other side that is against the vaccine. So it's like, when you're pulling this misinformation down, all you're doing is making it seem as if, like, why don't you want people to see this? And then they start not trusting you even more. Versus, like, you've got to have it open for discussion to where both sides can accurately state their opinion, and then you, the individual, get to choose what you want to do.
Yeah, it's so hard because I can empathize with both sides. If you are trying to dig through information online and you're noticing that like certain types of information can be harder to come by, or certain types of information seems to be getting pulled, I can be empathetic with somebody that is searching and is like, okay, well, hold on, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, I think it's okay to broadly appeal to studies and to like the scientific community to find out like where we should go. But you can always find one PhD that will tell you like some crazy shit. And on the other hand, I can see the frustration when you have like a medical community that more or less like stands unified in certain topics. And then you have like one or two doctors that will become like world famous because they want to give the contradictory opinion. And we've seen this play out in pretty bad ways before too. The number one way I can think of is is it doctor in I think it was France? Was his name Foucault? It was the guy that was like, he set the world ablaze with his hydroxychloroquine. Oh, Raoul. It was Dr. It might have been Dr. Raoul. But he started like more or less the whole hydroxychloroquine thing. And when you looked into his study, it was like 12 people, and he dropped two people from it that died. And there were people all over the world where I think the FDA listed these two drugs as being like short on stock. Like some people couldn't get this because it was being treated. I think it was either an anti-malarial or it was used for other diseases as well, and people couldn't get their prescriptions anymore. So like I don't know. What do you think? Like, what do you do when you can have like one or two or three bad actors that can get so much traction online, spreading misinformation? Like, do you try to nip that in the bud? Do you just put them out there and hope that a fuck ton of people don't end up following them? Or
I think it's up to the individual. The individual has to make their own choice. At the same token, like you look at people like, say for example, Joe Rogan, and then Alex Jones did the medication that people on the left were saying it's a horse thing. Come to find out that then 2015 it was a Nobel Prize winning thing, and even that I'm just like, yeah, I'm not taking that because I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. It's just one of these things of like where do we go to get accurate information that is unbiased, unpolitical, or non-political? It's not being weaponized by either side, where the benefit is overall your health. And I feel like in today's day and age with the big pharma being the way it is, fuck, dude, I don't know who to trust anymore. Instead, it's just like, you know what? I'm just going to do me. I just don't want to get the vaccine right now. I want to see what happens. I'm in good health. I already had COVID. Not saying I can't get it again. But it feels to me like even our scientists, even our medical leaders, I feel like with this whole ordeal, the populace expected them to have the answers right away because we live in the age of Amazon Prime, to where everything is right then and there. We need a vaccine the very next day. We need to cure this now. And I think for the first time in many people's lives, we're getting behind the scenes look at how the medical meat per se is made, and a lot of people don't like it. Like a lot of people don't realize the trial and error that go into something like this with any vaccination, whether it be polio, anything. And I think that's where we stand right now. There's information on both sides, and nobody really, or people either they really believe their side. There's people like me. It's like, dude, I don't know what the fuck to believe, but I just know don't force that shit on me, and we'll live happily ever after, I guess. And if I don't, well, then I'm going to die from COVID. And what do you care? You're vaccinated, so.
Sure. I guess like the unique issue with the vaccines, I would agree with you, I think, on like every other point. But the unique thing about vaccines is the fact that it can affect other people. And I think that's what makes it like more unique in that sense. Like it's the difference between smoking and secondhand smoke.
Well, didn't Fauci said that you're still a spreader even with the vaccine?
You could be, but you're also less likely to get infected, so therefore you're less likely to spread it. I guess when I think of like sociological issues or when I think of epidemiological issues, I like do you have a kid?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a son and he's 10 years old, and I try to imagine, like, let's say that my kid goes to school, and let's say that there was a family, they were anti-vax. Let's say that he gets a disease from another kid in class. Not a big deal. He recovers from it, but he's like one of the unlucky people that has long COVID. And now for the rest of his life, he's not dead, but like he can't run as much as the other kids. He can't climb as much. He's out of breath all the time. Like like as a parent, like really like the only thing you have in life is to protect your children to some extent. And for something that much out of your control to impact them in that way is something that would make me so incredibly frustrated. I guess that's kind of I agree with you 1,000,000% on so many other things. And I especially agree because I understand your point of view. Like you mentioned, like the fire pits, I think you said, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think many people know what that is, but I think when you guys were working a long time ago in Afghanistan, you guys would just throw a whole bunch of fucked up shit in pits and set it on fire. And the idea was that like, you're fine. Like, it's not going to hurt you. And then I think like some years later, they're like, hold on.
We even knew. And that was the problem is that, essentially all trash stuff like that, we had to burn it, but we even knew like this is not good for us, but we literally had no other alternative. And so the government's kind of like our chain of command was like, do it anyway, and then just stay away from it. Well, that doesn't always fix the problem. So
because a bunch of people came out with like cancers and all sorts of like really fucked up shit, like 5-10 years like after coming back and shit. So I mean, I definitely understand like your point of view, and it's harder when you've already been in a situation where like the government has fucked you, and well now the CDC wants me to do this, like, yeah, okay, well, fuck you, I'm definitely sympathetic towards your position, but it would just suck so much if like the virus just fucked our whole humanity up, and there were like ways to like, I feel like a vaccine is like that's my lowest effort thing to protect myself because I hate wearing masks and distancing is whatever. But like a vaccine is so easy. I mean, you've gotten fucking 50. When you go through basic and everything, right? Like they line you up and you guys get like 30 fucking vaccines, especially if you deploy anywhere, right? I don't know. It's just the fact that you can infect other people is the thing that kind of fucks my mind a little bit on like where is the social responsibility at for the vaccination stuff.
And that definitely goes down a rabbit hole of social responsibility or moral responsibility for somebody else's health and welfare. And I get that stance. For me, it's just one of these things. To go back to the other point, as far as the other vaccinations given, those are all time-tested vaccines that we knew there were no long-term or secondary, tertiary effects. So yeah, there is. I get your point of view as far as like your son going to a school, but even with that guarantee from the state or the federal government, so whichever it could be, saying that, hey, we're good to go now. A lot of that is based upon your individual responsibility as a parent saying, do I trust this or do I not? Do I want to choose to let my kids stay home and do online learning and things such as that? So I think there's no guarantee that your child's not going to get it. And of course. I know that's not what you're saying. I just hope that parents don't actually fully believe when these medical professionals say like, oh, hey, it's free and clear over here. Like they don't know for a fact. They don't know 100%. And I feel like maybe some people kind of buy into this narrative on whichever side with it being like full gospel. It's like, biggest thing for me is like, I just don't trust the government. I don't trust it. I don't trust a lot of these so-called politicians that, number one, are not medical experts. And number two, I feel like there's been a lot of weaponized, politicized science. So I don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, I'm sympathetic, especially because it seems like everybody goes so hard in one direction.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know right now what the vaccine effectiveness is against preventing you from getting the Delta variant. It's like, because it seems like it's getting lower every time. Like,
well, there's a new variant now, right? There's a new variant that Fauci just came out and said they're keeping an eye on. They're not too concerned, but there's a new variant.
Yeah, there's. I know there was one in South Africa that was super heavily mutated. I didn't know if it could infect more people. But I mean, like, fuck. What was I just saying? Oh God, I totally just lost my thought. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, like people need to be more honest about what things do. I agree with that. It's one of the biggest reasons. Like people get mad at me when I say misinformation on the left is just as harmful as misinformation on the right, even though it's not strictly true. There are some lies that are way worse than other lies.
Yeah. They just get accused of being a fence sitter, though.
Yeah, but the problem is that like when you have misinformation on your side, it pushes people towards the other side. So if I think that Trump's lies are some of the worst things in U.S. history, which I would probably argue, or maybe not in U.S. history, this is my lifetime, I would probably argue that. But I would say that, hey, you on the left, when you lie, you're pushing people over to believe Trump's lies. So you're almost culpable, right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
that's what made Trump so popular, though, is because basically he was the middle finger to the left, and people just pushed over to him on the right. I think, and the other thing is like I know these people know what they're doing. It's just classic manipulation. It's just like take for example Crenshaw, or take for example AOC. Any of these, it feels like our political spectrum has turned into the Kardashians. I don't like these Twitter battles between left and right politicians. Like, do your fucking job and shut the fuck up. Like all it is now is just it's clout chasing, it's fame seeking, so they can get a book deal once they're out of office, or to get hired on with Raytheon. Who knows anymore? But it feels like it's become. Well, I mean, the benefit of it is more people are involved in our political system than I think ever in the history of this country. I think more people are really paying attention because they understand how deeply it impacts them on an individual level. But the other thing is I feel like there's just a lot of grifters. There's a lot of clout chasers on both sides of this, especially the right now. Like when you're the underdog, you got a lot of clout chasers coming up through the ranks.
I guess so I can actually point to a similar problem between like the Twitter wars and medical misinformation. I'm going to put misinformation in brackets. So one of the problems is that when the coronavirus came out, there was an unprecedented rush around the world to figure out like, well, what is it? What kind of information we know about it? And I think that led to kind of a bit of a toxic environment where it's like, okay, we can put out studies that haven't been peer reviewed yet, but other people can look at them. Or we could like not do that and be a little bit more cautious and just make recommendations behind closed doors and kind of like wait for the peer review process to do its thing. But the problem is that anytime you decide to act in a more responsible manner, you kind of cede ground to people that are acting irresponsibly. So if you decide, okay, we actually don't know how these trials are going to go. We're not going to say anything. And then on the other side, they're like, these vaccines are turning you into large gay frogs and you're going to die. Like, it's like, okay, well, fuck. Well, hold on. Right now, all the trial data shows that there's like a 99% effectiveness and everything is actually right. But now let's say that like a few months from now, information goes out, it's like, okay, it's not 99% effective. It looks like it's more, especially because it's Delta variant, it's like 75% effective. Well, now you look like you lied. And it's like, okay, well, fuck. Yeah, I guess I kind of did, but dude, the guy over there is telling you he's going to turn you to gay frogs. Like, what the fuck? And it's the same with Twitter too, where it's like, should politicians stay off Twitter? You could, but damn, dude, AOC and some of these people, these motherfuckers fundraise like crazy off of their social media presence.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I can understand the frustration. I had a similar thing on my stream where I said for a long time, I do not cover breaking news. I don't do it. It is cancerous. It is toxic. And it basically, it's, I don't even ever get this idea, but like airport bombing just gets reported. Everybody on the right is online and they're like, oh God, please let it be Muhammad. Everybody on the left is like, oh man, please let it be like Jimmy John from fucking Iowa. Like everybody's like cheerleading, waiting. And as soon as like any fucking piece of information comes out, people are like, oh yes, it was Tyrone, or like, oh no, it was Michael, you know. And it's like, Jesus, like come on. But I noticed that like when I would do that, I don't want to talk about breaking news. Well, when I go on Twitch, you know, the number one Hasan is up there with 100,000 views. You know, Vosh is up there with 20,000 viewers, and they're just spewing all sorts of completely baseless misinformation about it. It's like, fuck. Okay, well, I guess I might as well come in and give like what I think is like a reasonable take or whatever. And I'm forced to, because truly, I never want to comment on breaking news. I think it is so irresponsible. But I feel like I have to, because if I don't, I automatically cede that ground to everybody else that's willing to do it. Fuck, that is such a horrible position to be in. Yeah.
It really is. And you're 100% right, because the first thing that happens when there's a mass shooting or anything is, okay, what was the race, sexuality, and gun used? Yeah. Top three right away, because that's the first thing.
Let it be an AR-15 with an extended
mag. Oh God, yeah. And please let them have a rebel flag in their truck. Please let there be a. Yeah, absolutely. People, they latch onto that.
Yeah, Lawrence was like, oh, this guy was slashing tires. He had a Union shirt on. He must have been a leftist. I was like, really? Are only left-leaning people like unions? Or people are like, oh, he posted that Trump meme, 10 years ago, or he had an Antifa shirt on like 4 years ago. That's your guy. That's your. It's like a reverse dodgeball where you're picking teams at the start, and you don't want to get the guy who like ends up being a school shooter. You're like, oh my God, it's so crazy. Yeah.
Fat kid, go over there. No, there was something that kind of like, people are just loving them some Marjorie Taylor Greene right now on the right, and I'm just kind of like looking at her as like, she's the equivalent of AOC on the left. When you come out and you've posted things in the past saying like Jewish space lasers, like what, and people voted for this? Like if you just take a second and you step back, and it dawned on me that if you take a second and you step back and you look at the previous election in 2016, and you really look at intelligent people in our society, many of which have no social media exposure, but you look at the options that we were given. Is this the best that America has to offer? Like, it's not. It's really not.
So this is like, as I become more and more, I'm not black-pilled, I'm void-pilled. I'm abyss-pilled on our political system.
There's so many pills.
I think that media and entertainment and our political leaders, I don't think our system is rigged at all. I think we vote these people in, and I think that the leadership that you have in the United States today is absolutely what the American people voted for. And I think that when you have a lot of people that want to look around and say, our political leaders are messed up, how did we get here? I think there needs to be a lot more introspection done, because people on the left will look at people on the right and go, how can you guys fall victim to like this kind of fear mongering? Like, this is horrible. And then in the next breath, they'll support, like billions of dollars of damage and like riots. Or, like people will point at people on, it's frustrating because
people, they tend to isolate specific incidents. And again, I was guilty of this as well before. Again, I had the great awakening of like, look, you're being manipulated. You're being manipulated by a party. Yeah. You're being, and that's what I think a lot of people don't want to come out and admit because of ego. Hubris gets in the way. It's like, hey guys, I got it wrong. I realized where I was, because even when Trump came out, it's like, we're gonna take the guns first, due process. I was like, no, constitutionally, I disagree with that. And when I said that, people were like, what, you're questioning God, King, Emperor Trump? It's like, yes, he's in violation of the Constitution, abso-fucking-lutely. And people, I think, in this day and age are starting to understand that you don't need to tie in your identity with an individual politician, but instead question the individual choices of said politician. Versus like an overall. So somebody says like, are you a Trump supporter? It's like, that's a hard question to answer. Like, on what issue are you talking about? Like, overall, like, I can't answer that. It's like, but on individual issues or policies, I can answer that. And that's what I think people are starting to wake up to in the understanding of, like somebody in the chat said earlier, in regards to the Jewish space lasers. And then you say, the right was criticizing AOC in a video that came out where she was dancing on a rooftop. It's like, yeah, I fell victim to that. It was like, oh, look at this. And then you look, it's like, wait, she's fucking dancing on a rooftop. What's wrong with that? Like, oh, those fucking Democrats dancing on, like, who the fuck cares? Like, that's a non-issue. And I think that we have a tendency of taking these non-issues and trying to make them mainstream bigger issues to a character assassinate these individuals that we just don't like, versus actually looking at the policies. Like, if you want to demonize AOC, demonize her for the policies she's stood with, which are just fucking stupid in some cases. It's like, okay, fair enough. But like a personal action, it's kind of like, all right, like she's dancing on a roof. I personally don't give a shit about. Good for her. She seems happy. more power to her. And the same could be said for people on the right. It's just like you said, that we try and find specific things to go after people on and discredit them. It's like, well, so and so fucking smoked a cigarette, so their opinion doesn't matter on COVID. It's like, wait, what? Like, okay, that does. Or I got crucified when somebody asked me about Caitlyn Jenner running in California. It's like, it was just an Instagram story thing, and they said, "What's your opinion on Caitlyn Jenner running?" I was like, interested in what she has to say, and instantly I had people come and say, "Oh, you agree with freaking liberals?" Like, wait. Like you agree with transgenderism? It's like, well, no, but I really believe in your right to do whatever you want to do. It's your body. I shouldn't be able to tell you no. But I was instantly demonized by saying, wait, you even want to listen to what she has to say? It's like, well, yeah, I do. Well, she's mentally challenged, transgender body, just whatever you want to talk about. It's like, okay, well, by that method of logic, me having PTSD, which is a psychological disorder or whatever you want to call it, am I now void of having any kind of rational thought when it comes into politics or anything like that by having one issue? Which I've had I know you've debated people that were transgenders. Like, I know some very intelligent transgender people. And I think that more people are starting to awaken to the understanding or the idea of, like, we can agree to disagree on certain things and not attack what it is they're dealing with or whatever they support or stand for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how I don't know what Trump did to some of these people, man.
He was orange. I don't know.
Without even trying to like shit on without even trying to attack conservatives or Republicans or whatever, just like the level of fanaticism for Trump, it was just it was something that I was never in my life ready for. There's so much. I have a pretty varied background in terms of like my experience and everything. So I have a mom who is Cuban. She came over, I think, when she was 4, and she is an Air Force vet. One of the most patriotic. I don't know, like some immigrants, when they come to the U.S. and they do okay, they're like the most patriotic people in the fucking world. And my mom was absolutely like that. And there's this always sticks with me so much because it was such a change. I remember when the Monica Lewinsky stuff came out. How old was I? Was I like 8 or 9? Or what, do you remember what year this was?
Yeah, man, I was in like was it 95, 94? I forget.
Okay.
I was in school.
I feel like I was really young because I don't think I understood much what she was telling me. Yeah. But I remember one day before she dropped me off to, it was either like kindergarten or daycare or something. And I remember she was crying when she told me. And she said, Stevie, this Monica Lewinsky stuff is horrible. And what you don't understand, and you're not going to understand this for a while, is that the president of the United States is the head of our armed forces. And how the president acts sets the standard for how everybody will treat you. And my mom was a woman in the military, and her whole life, and she rose to the challenge. She liked it, but like her life was like proving herself constantly, especially 20, 30 years ago, right? It was proving herself, like, and she had a lot of stories of like, her trying to, people constantly shit testing her and everything. And I remember her crying when she told me about the Monica Lewinsky stuff. And to watch her turn around for all the Trump stuff, and when that grab him by the pussy stuff came out, she's like, well, sometimes boys will be boys. What? No way. Are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't understand what changed so much. And and I will say I hate.
You know what changed? It's a bias. It's the identity. It's that you see. So even when that came out, it was like, oh, that's locker room talk. Like, do I think Trump actually did that? You're fucking A right. I do. Do I think he fucked Stormy Daniels? Yeah, fucking A right. I think he did. Like Trump was known for being this way. So to sit there and defend Trump as if, and this is what pisses me off about Republicans. Like they paint him as a god emperor Trump. Yeah. I got a buddy, Ryan Fournier. I don't know if he's listening. I love him to death. He's a good guy. But this dude loves him some Trump to the point where like he's posting pictures. Oh, he looks younger. Put him back in office. It's like, wait, what? Like what? But you're right, because when all that stuff came to fruition, when it came out, even I was sitting there and just like, wait, how can you deny this? Like there's overwhelming. He paid her hush money. Like legit, it was proven. And then when he said, and the audio was that you grab him by the pussy, they don't kiss him on the lips. Yes, and I feel like a lot of people were very hypocritical in ignoring that, because when we see these movements like the protecting all children and the rich elites and things getting away with like the Epsteins and things such as that, when Trump comes out and shows to be in league with similar mentality of I'm rich, I can do what I want, why was there not more overwhelming pushback on this? Because again, people's identity are tied into a politician. But it also brought light to where it's like, look, we have to stop demanding these politicians have perfect lives and pasts. We're all going to have fucked up pasts. But
Sure.
we have to live in this glass house now, which again, there are some things that are unforgivable. Yes, I'm not sitting there saying, "Oh, this guy was a pedophile at one time." That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, just not
Just
so.
that standard for acceptance is like,
yeah.
and I'm not saying that like you should or shouldn't like him based on like one or two of these things, but like there was and I'm sure you follow this too, and even if you were a Republican and liked Trump at the time, even if you were, there must have been some, because I know for me there were so many moments where it's like, oh my God, Trump is actually done. He doesn't survive this one.
I didn't think so. Yeah, I thought when that bit broke, I was like, he's fucking done. He's done, and he still made it. I was like, holy shit.
Well, I thought the McCain stuff, I couldn't believe.
Yeah.
When he was like, I prefer people that don't get caught. I was like, damn, this is like a guy that was fucking tortured by, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was like, no way does he survive. But yeah, Republicans were like, yeah, true. Yeah. Fuck POWs.
That was one thing that really aggravated me when he said stuff like that, or we don't losers, and it was just kind of like, bro. And the only reason he got away with it with McCain on the right is because McCain is essentially a rhino to the right, therefore fuck him.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I'll never do is that I didn't agree with McCain's policies. I didn't agree with his politics. I think he put the nail in the coffin on Obamacare for the right. But I'm not going to criticize the guy's service because I wasn't there. I don't know. They called him Songbird McCain, things such as that. I don't know, man. And I'm not going to, and like General Mattis, when he went out against Trump, like he was praised as being the God General of the Marine Corps. Mattis came out against Trump, just went the complete opposite direction. I think more military members did. And instantly people were like, oh, that guy's a bitch. Fuck his service. It's like, wait, now hold on. I was like, we can have a differential between somebody's political leanings and what they've done for this country, just like Crenshaw, just like other people that have served that are now on the political spectrum. I don't agree with a lot of what Crenshaw, or I'd say 50% of what Crenshaw stands for, I don't agree with, but I'm never going to attack this dude's service. But the McCain thing, I feel like Trump got away with because the majority of right people didn't like McCain.
So it's fair,
yeah, which is still not fair. Like you don't say that to a POW. It's like that's kind of fucked up. But
to be clear, I'm sorry, just to be clear, when I said that, so he's seen as fair game, is what I was saying. Not that it's it's fair.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I didn't understand that myself. I mean, actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm like, I did understand that. And for a brief moment, I considered it, but it was just like, no, like I can't sit there and talk shit about this guy. Testimonials are testimonials, but that's not evidence. Now, I don't know, man. It's just, and that's the way our politics are these days, to where like when Trump said that, grab him by the pussy and then talking shit about McCain, I was like, oh my God. Like Trump, I can't pin it all on him. The MSM went after him. He went after the MSM. It was a back and forth. And it was just one of these things of like when you're negotiating foreign policy with North Korea and you're calling him a little fat man, it's like, oh my fuck me. Like, oh my God.
Or like the saluting like the fucking North Korean generals and shit. And it's like, oh man, what are you doing, dude?
I know. Man. And then the other part, it's like, I just got to watch this because this is entertaining as hell. And Americans love being entertained. It's like, did that really just fucking happen? But, and I understand how some people are like, we need to return to normalcy and normal diplomacy in a sense of behind closed doors. Yeah. Trump didn't care. Trump's an entertainer. And I'm not saying it's good and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it just is what it is there. But yeah, when you're right. When he went after McCain, I was like, how the fuck is this flying? Like, I don't understand that.
Yep. Crazy world we live in. Yeah.
Well, bro, again, thank you for coming on, brother. And I hope you have a wonderful day and good luck over there. Hopefully you get to come home soon.
Thanks a lot. Hopefully.
All right.
I'll see you later.
Be safe, man.
Bye. Okay, I'm gonna start getting big bans every time I'm talking to somebody, and you guys are like, push back hard. You better push back on this. You better push back. You're not my fucking debate coach. That is the cringiest shit. Stop. Okay. Oh my God, it is so cringy. Jesus Christ.